If you're approaching retirement with significant assets, property, super, investments, you've probably wondered at some point whether you'll qualify for any part of the age pension. And some people in that position start thinking about whether restructuring their assets could improve their eligibility. What I want to walk through today is why that thinking, while understandable, often leads to decisions that cost more than they save. So in this video, I want to cover how the age pension assets test actually works for people with significant wealth, the trap most people don't see coming, and why giving up $1 to get 50 cents back is never a good financial decision. Because the age pension isn't irrelevant to self-funded retirees, but the way most people think about it leads them toward decisions they later regret. Understanding how it actually works changes those decisions completely. This is general in nature, so it's important to consider your own situation, because everyone's circumstances are different. But what I'm going to walk through applies broadly enough to be worth understanding. Let's start with how the assets test actually works, because most people have a vague sense of it, but not a clear picture. The age pension in Australia is means tested, which means both your income and your assets affect how much you receive. For the assets test specifically, there are thresholds. Below a certain asset level, you may receive a full pension. Between the lower and upper threshold, you may receive a part pension. Above the upper threshold, no pension. And those thresholds are different depending on whether you own your own home and whether you're a single or part of a couple. The key number for a homeowner couple is currently around $1 million in assessable assets before the pension cuts off entirely. For a single homeowner, it's lower, around $650,000. Now, these numbers change. They're indexed, they move. So the specific figures are less important than understanding the structure. What I see quite consistently is people in their late 50s who are sitting just above those thresholds. Not dramatically above, just above. And they start to wonder, if I restructure a few things, could I get a part pension? And the answer is sometimes yes. But the question worth asking first is whether getting that part pension is actually worth what it costs to get it. This is where the trap lives, because the assets test reduces the pension at a rate of $3 per fortnight for every $1,000 of assessable assets above the lower threshold. Which means to increase your pension entitlement by a meaningful amount, you need to reduce your assessable assets by a significant amount. And the common way people try to do that is gifting. Giving money to adult children, paying off a child's mortgage, contributing to a grandchild's education. All of which sound generous, and often are, but when the primary motivation is improving pension eligibility, the maths rarely works in your favour. Here's the simple version. If you give away $100,000, you've permanently reduced your asset base by $100,000. What do you get back in pension? At the taper rate, roughly $3,900 per year in additional pension entitlements. So you've given up $100,000 to receive $3,900 per year. That's a payback period of over 25 years. And that's before you factor in what the $100,000 could have earned if it stayed invested. You gave up $1 to get 50 cents back, and in most cases, that's exactly what it is. There's also the gifting rule, worth understanding specifically. Centrelink allows gifting of up to $10,000 per year and $30,000 over 5 years. Before the gifted amount is still counted as an asset for pension purposes. Which means, if you give your children $100,000 hoping to reduce your assessable assets, Centrelink will continue to count the amount above the gifting threshold as if you still have it for 5 years. So you've given the money away, you no longer have it, but Centrelink still counts it. The asset reduction you were hoping for doesn't happen the way you expected. Now, there are legitimate reasons to gift money to your children, helping with a deposit, supporting education, passing on wealth while you can see them enjoy it. Those are valid, and if the timing and amount make sense within your overall financial position, there's nothing wrong with it. But doing it primarily to reduce assessable assets for pension purposes is almost always a poor financial decision. The tail is wagging the dog. The second part of the trap is about decisions that affect eligibility. without people realising. Because it's not just gifting, there are common financial decisions that change your pension position in ways most people haven't thought through. Downsizing the family home is one of the most common. Someone sells a $1.5 million home and buys something smaller for $900,000. The $600,000 difference goes into assessable assets, and suddenly a pension entitlement they had, or were close to having, disappears. Not because anything went wrong, just because the decision changed the asset picture in a way they hadn't anticipated. There's also the downsizer contribution, which allows people over 55 to contribute up to $300,000 each from a home sale into super. Super in accumulation phase is not assessable for the age pension assets test until you reach pension age. So for some people, the downsizer contribution is a legitimate way to restructure assets in a way that makes financial sense beyond just the pension. But again, the decision needs to be made based on the full financial picture, not just pension eligibility. So what's the practical takeaway from all this? A few things worth understanding. Before you make any decisions, first, the age pension is worth understanding, even if you think it doesn't apply to you. Asset values change, markets move, circumstances shift. Someone who is comfortably above the threshold today may not be in 15 years. Second, don't make financial decisions primarily to improve pension eligibility. Gifting, restructuring, downsizing, these decisions should make sense based on your overall financial position. If the only reason to do something is to get a part pension, run the numbers first. Because giving up $1 to get 50 cents back is never a good trade. Third, understand the gifting rule before you give anything away. The 5-year rule exists, Centrelink knows about it, plan accordingly. And fourth, if you're close to a threshold of making significant financial decisions, get advice before you act, not after. Because some of these decisions are very difficult to reverse. The age pension isn't something to obsess over if you're in a strong financial position, but it's not something to ignore completely. Understanding how it works and how common decisions affect it means you won't accidentally make things worse while trying to make them better. And you won't give up $1 to get 50 cents back. This is general in nature, so it's important to consider your own situation, because the age pension rules are complex and individual circumstances vary significantly. The figures I've mentioned are current as of the time of this recording, but do change, so always check current thresholds with Centrelink or a financial planner. If you're approaching retirement and want structured guidance rather than figuring this out alone, I work with Australians in exactly that position. You can find details below.